The Chargers in 2023 were trying to bounce back from the Clipper. Sorry, I still have the case of the Los Angeles Clipper Charger ring. Sorry, I have a case of the Clipper ring with this team. They were trying to bounce back from the Clipper ring that they had in the playoffs a month prior in the 2022 playoffs with, that game with the Jaguars in that playoff game. So remember when they gave up that big lead to the all-elite Jaguars in that wildcard game in January of last year? So they come into this past season trying to recover from that. But unfortunately, they struggled even more, primarily thanks to very bad coaching from head coach Brandon Staley. And there were a lot of key injuries across the board from the likes of Mike Williams, who was lost for the season, and then they lost Joey Bosa at one point. But the biggest death blow, and I guess the capper of all this, was quarterback Justin Herbert. They lose him in week 14 in a game against Denver at home to a finger injury in his throwing hand. And, well, the Chargers weren't really particularly doing that well at that point in the season, but it was pretty much essentially the death of their season. And adding to that was a couple of days later, losing to the Las Vegas Raiders in one of the most embarrassing losses in their history. And I guess you could make an argument of NFL history as well. So they lose in embarrassing fashion on Thursday night, only on Prime Video, which led to the firing of Brandon Staley and general manager Tom Telesco, which honestly came 11 months way too late, but that's besides the point. So the Chargers end their season at 5-12, and now you have to wonder who is going to be your next head coach for this team. Would anyone want to be the head coach for this team? But even with that, there would always be someone. I just answered my own question. So anyway, they replaced Tom Telesco with former Ravens director of player personnel, Joe Horowitz. A key piece in that organization comes over to the Chargers to try and help this team. And replacing Brandon Staley is a proven winning head coach this time around, in the form of someone that no one thought would come back to the NFL, but he has now, Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh. So Jim Harbaugh is fresh off of winning his first and so far now, for now, only college football national championship as soon as the Chargers season ended. So he comes in with a lot of winning experience in college, and of course back then when he was the 49ers head coach, but that was like over a decade ago. But anyway, he still comes in regardless with a lot of winning experience. And he also has recent winning experience. So for the Chargers, this is a good get for them. But I have some questions later on about Jim Harbaugh when we get there. But still, a good hire for them. But they also traded away receiver Keenan Allen to the Bears in return for a 4th-round pick. So that's kind of a little bit of a blow because Keenan Allen was still their top receiver, but, he was getting a little bit older. So some of the other moves that the Chargers made this past offseason, they didn't really lose a whole lot because, well, they got rid of the guys that were getting injury prone, like Mike Williams. Again, lost him to a torn ACL, but he was always getting injured. He moves on to the Jets. Austin Eckler, kind of a productive running back, but also kind of got injury prone too. He moves on to the Commanders. So you try to replace them with guys that are also kind of injury prone too, like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards from the Baltimore Ravens. They're coming off pretty significant injuries from last year. So you better hope that they stay healthy. Tight end Will Dissly from the Seahawks, maybe someone you can rely on. Center Bradley Bozeman from the Panthers to try and bolster that offensive line. And then defensively, linebacker Denzel Perryman from the Texans. The draft is where they did their dirty work by getting a tackle by the name of Joe Alt from Notre Dame. And then receiver Ladd McConkey from Georgia, so another weapon for Justin Herbert. Defensively, they got guys like Junior Colson at linebacker from Michigan. So Jim Harbaugh gets one of his guys reunited. Defensive tackle Justin Elugbai, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Alabama. And corner Cam Hart from Notre Dame, a relatively decent corner. And then also, they got receivers Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson from USC and Michigan. So Jerry Rice's son, staying in Southern California. So that's a win for him. So that being said, the this, despite getting a winning head coach in Jim Harbaugh, despite getting these pieces around the offense, I still have some concerns for them. I still have concerns about this team. And that starts with Justin Herbert's weaponry. Because, the good news is, despite retooling the offense, is that his receiving core is much younger. They're much healthy. They seem to be much healthier, and they're already gaining chemistry with each other as training camp rolls along. The bad news is that because you got rid of guys like Keenan Allen, you got rid of guys like Mike Williams, and of course you also got rid of Austin Eckler. Outside of second-year player Quentin Johnson, who kind of struggled last year, and you also have veteran Josh Palmer, they don't have a lot of experience. So, again, the good news is that they're already establishing that relationship with each other in camp. But, of course, the in-game action is where it really is going to matter for this team. And then the offensive line, it certainly has questions of its own, despite being a major need this offseason. The only thing that they did with the offensive line was through the draft, like getting that tackle, Joe Alt, who is a great blocker. But unfortunately, he has to play right tackle, which he's never done before. So they also didn't address Corey Linsley's retirement. Actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. They did with Bradley Bozeman. But his other running mates, Zion Johnson and Jameer Slayer, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, they struggled last year, and they're going to have to bounce back pretty well after having a very, very bad last year where Justin Herbert got hit a lot. So looking at some of the key games for this Charger squad going into this coming fall, you look at the first game at home against the kind of revamped Las Vegas Raiders, although not really. It's kind of the same team, but just with a different head coach and some questions of their own. But you want to prove if Jim Harbaugh's the man and that can help this team, you got to get a win right out of the gate. And then you travel to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers a couple weeks later to take on the sort of new look Pittsburgh Steelers as well. And then week 4 is going to be a big test for this team, taking on Patrick Mahomes and the defending two-time Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. So kind of two big early tests early on for this team. So speaking of Jim Harbaugh, obviously the biggest question for me, obviously, is what is he going to look like going after he's been away from the NFL for a long time. The last time he was in the NFL was, coaching my team, the San Francisco 49ers, in 2014. So about a little over 10 years. And yeah, things didn't exactly end on the best note for Big Jim in the NFL. But that being said, he has had a very good rep of turning very bad teams into winners in the blink of an eye. Just look at my Niners from those years in 2011 and 2013. And then look what he's done with the University of Michigan since he stepped in in 2015, and then recently last year in his final year, where he finally won the national championship with them in his last game as a coach there. But now, he's coming back into the NFL. What is he going to bring to the table, and what is he going to offer back in the big leagues? You got to wonder what kind of schemes or what is he going to use that he learned it while he's in Michigan, because what he tried to bring in when he first went into the NFL with the 49ers, it's not going to work 10 years later, obviously. So it'll be interesting what he brings to the table this time around. And then obviously I think this is a question I addressed last year. Can this team finally break the curse of clip? I still have that case of chargering. So can they break that case of chargering? Because whether it was injuries or blowing leads or just flat out sucking, because it's been going on for how many years now? Oh yeah, too many to count up. The Clippers, the Chargers, they've dealt with all this trauma for the better part of too many years, too many decades to count. So Jim Harbaugh, he's certainly going to have to readjust to the NFL. But maybe he could be the coach that puts an end to all the misery, all the clippering memes for good. But it's going to take one step at a time. So obviously your top goal for this season is to see how this team is going to fare under Jim Harbaugh. Because for years, the Chargers have been, well, you know, especially since they moved to Los Angeles and be that kind of brother that nobody wants. Sorry to say it. So again, even with the hiring of a winning coach like Jim Harbaugh, I honestly don't expect the Chargers to make the playoffs just yet, but they may surprise me, especially because, you know, they still have Justin Herbert, but they still got plenty of questions around their offense. However, I do hope that, you know, now that they have Jim Harbaugh, they can start the beginning of the end of, you know, this case of that case of clippering in the powder blue side of Los Angeles. And that could start in just a couple months.